everyone see that all right? I've had ones brilliant. I've had ones before where I've got halfway through it. Fantastic, thank you. And like Emma says, if you've got any questions, like the whole point of this is it's not me, it's not a lecture, it's not me whittering on at you and you're supposed to go away right assignments. It's totally interactive. So if you disagree with me or you want to know more or anything, just talk and just ask, and it's absolutely fine. Lionel knows me well enough to jump in and he'll have loads of questions, so it's fine. So one of the first things that we've got to think about is Kickstart for us is this idea about how do we get people to be more entrepreneurial or more enterprising, because one of the key things that businesses value is creativity, because creativity is the concept of like coming up with ideas to do this. And one of the real struggles is people think the same way all the time. So if you've ever been in a brainstorming session and things, if you do it the same way all the time with different people, you tend to come back to the same ideas. It's a really challenging thing to actually find ways to unlock ideas. And a lot of the success stories we've seen around innovation and we see around businesses, startups, is people just taking technology and putting it together or identifying different ways to attract stuff. So interestingly, I was working with a group of computer students this morning, and I'll tell you this, but don't go run off and do it. Hopefully you won't. But they were talking about discussing an app called Lola, and it was called the Language of Love app. And it was this idea of, rather than Tinder where you sort of match up physically, it's about emotional engagement and how your language of love is and things. And you sort of go, wow, that's a really good idea. And it's those sorts of breakthrough moments that you can get to because an idea has been generated in a certain way and putting ideas together that becomes important. So the first thing to sort of talk about with you guys is, there's loads of ways to unlock ideas. And ideas, for me, the more ideas we have, the likelihood is we're going to get better ideas. And the dream of the sitting down one day and the light bulb going off above your head and suddenly next thing you know you're a billionaire and all of this is pretty rare, to say the least, but actually pretty doesn't happen. Most ideas come from people working together, talking to each other, instigating things, going to see different things. So I guess one of the things I'm trying to say here is that I'm going to talk about some approaches today, but it's not the only way to do it. And if you've got an idea or you want to talk about it, or you're not quite sure, or you just got a problem, then we're quite happy to sit down with you and talk about things in different ways. But these are some tools that if you wanted to go away and you wanted to have a little session with yourself or some friends, and you can unlock some ideas potentially for yourself in the future. So one of the first ones, and it's quite a powerful one that we talk about, and it's one of those tools that's very deceptively simple, but actually very, very hard to use correctly. And it's something called the 5 whys. And it's literally what it says is you take a problem and you become like a 5-year-old and you go, well, why does that happen? Why does that happen? Why does that happen? And the real concept is that you get to the point that you get root cause analysis. And this is idea of like, if you can distill an issue to its root cause and you can address that issue, suddenly you overcome it. Now, if I was to sort of retrospectively look at what we do, is one of the interesting things, so this is sort of, sorry, I'm going to apologize for my anecdotal data, but this is how it works. So when we worked at Heinz, when I worked at Heinz, one of the big things is to cook. If you could get people's cooking approaches to under 3 steps, it was a really interesting thing. Because the problem is, if it was more than 3 steps, people wouldn't bother cooking. And one of the things is we talked about, well, why is that? And it was partly because it's skills and partly because then suddenly there's more hurdles in the way, whereas actually, phoning up for a pizza or a ready meal is a lot quicker. And so we had a product where we had baked beans in a tin. And we were like, well, if you wanted baked beans on toast, you'd have to go and open the cupboard, get the tin, find a tin opener. Your tin opener would tend not to work, or it'd be a rubbish one, or you couldn't find it. You'd then get cross and you try and open all of this and the beans. And so your whole experience, when we started looking at using the 5 whys and analysing it, why didn't people use beans as much, was because there was too many steps in a way. So does anyone know how we changed that approach to baked beans? So how did we move away from having to go and find a tin opener and things like that? Just speak. You don't need to put your hands up. All shout at once. It's fine.
Easy open.
Easy open. But how did we make it easy open?
Ring pull.
Ring pull. Yeah. Did we need to write instructions to tell people how to use a ring pull? Well, no, you know. So suddenly we went, God, you can pull a tin and open it. And nowadays, if you go and you have to find a tin opener, it's really annoying. So it's almost gone so far the other way. But at the time, it's genius. And the people that did it were like, that's fantastic. And of course, then you can sell it to all the other companies. And actually, you could charge a premium for it as well, and things like that. And it's things like, so something as fundamental as how you open about how you approached food, how you ate it, all of this was really interesting. And it's even to the point where things like Amazon, what they do is they invest a huge amount of money in packaging, because if you get a package in and you can't open it, it makes you really angry. So before you've got the goods from them, you're really angry. So they don't do that. So rather than do that, if you buy anything from Amazon, how do you open an Amazon package now?
It's like sellotape that has a bit of thread that pulls.
Brilliant, yeah.
Easy.
And it feels nice, doesn't it? It's like that sort of, there's a sensual thing to it as well. It's really weird. And so it's gone are the days where you had like a pair of scissors in plastic wrapping that you needed scissors to open and all of that. So the 5 whys is a really good place to start. So what you could do is you can look at things and say, right, well, why is this a problem? Why is this a problem? And normally when you drill down, there might be multiple reasons, but if you can solve one of them, it becomes really interesting. And with beans and the ring pull, we were like, well, why weren't more people eating beans? And when we actually spoke to people and it was like, well, the can openers are bad, that gave us an opportunity. We could either reinvent the can opener, or we could remove it from the situation. And through that, we grew sales. And that's fundamentally how it worked. And it can be a product approach from that point of view. And another interesting campaign that I worked on was Maltesers. I assume everyone knows what Maltesers are. And we did a hugely successful campaign. And what we found, so let's try this. Let's try your experiences here. So a bag of Maltesers. Maltesers were one of the favorite sort of snacks, afternoon snacks for females in an office situation. Does anyone know why a bag of Maltesers might have been like a very female dominated snack in the afternoon? By the way, don't overthink it, just say what you think.
Was it something to do with the lower calories?
So that's the answer. So you know this now. But what we found out was, why do people think Maltesers are lower calories?
Small and airy.
They're small, yeah. What are they mostly made up of?
Malt.
And?
Air.
So what people thought was like, if you eat like a Twix, it's all chocolate and biscuit. But Maltesers didn't count because they were mostly air. And also people could open a bag of Maltesers and share them. And then therefore, if they gave away a couple from the bag, the whole calories didn't count towards them. So what they did is they looked at it and go, well, why do ladies in offices like this food? And looked at all of that. And it was really that. And what it got down to was that they felt that they were sticking to their diet or they were eating in a certain way. And so the way that we looked at that root cause then is we repositioned it as a low calorie sweet, even though it wasn't. We just put slightly less in a bag, made it a nice round number-ish. And then all the advertising around it was that it's so good because there's so much air in it that actually you've got to be naughty another way because you're not being naughty here. So even just not changing a product, you can change the messaging about the 5 whys and understanding that. So one of the first ways to look at stuff is to try and think about, if I see a problem, if I see an issue, what's behind it? So this is a thing now. This is something I'm going to get you to think about. We'll talk about it here. So the prediction is Netflix is to lose 700,000 UK customers in 2 years. This is what they think is going to happen in the future. Why do we think that Netflix is going to lose 700,000 UK customers? Anyone got a reason they might lose them?
It's looking as if that is to do with the fact that people don't have a lot of disposable income, and TV is kind of like a luxury.
So fantastic. So the first thing is Netflix is then perhaps considered a luxury. Okay, that's one reason. Anyone else?
Yeah,
go on. You don't have to,
yeah,
go.
Thanks a lot. So there's a concept around churn for entrepreneurs. So businesses will, like for subscription businesses, they would lose number of customers each month. So that's natural, but Netflix is losing because they've got a lot of competitors now in the market. So it's not, they started as the only dominant provider, but now there's a lot of other competitors in the market like this, like Disney and Amazon Premium and whatnot. So yeah.
So we've got absolutely. So we've got number one, might be a luxury. Number two, highly competitive. So they were the big beast in the market. What's another reason that we think they might be losing subscribers? Anyone else?
Well, I think so. It might also have to do with the changes in policies that they're doing. Right now, Netflix is basically I think they've already started where they're introducing ads, and they've reduced the subscription cost, and they're actually playing ads. So some people are fine with that. Most of them are not fine with ads. Nowadays. So might be that is one of the reasons also that they are losing customers. It can also do with the quality of content, because to be honest, personal experience-wise, I subscribe to two. That is Amazon Prime and Netflix. And I appear to be using more of Prime these days than Netflix. So I think that is only to do with the quality of content as well.
So fantastic. So that's another thing. So the quality of content, and that might be linked to competition because they were so successful and had everything. Everyone like Disney or whatever has gone, well, we'll set up a streaming service, and therefore they get that. Okay, so we've got luxurious, we've got this idea of competition, we've got this idea of actually the content on it's not very good, which then ties back into all of that. What would be another reason do we think that they might be losing customers?
Probably is it demographic, because they've got different demographic that they are catering to. So maybe some people are not interested anymore. They've got subscription, they don't they use it that much. And maybe kids, for example, my kids, they stopped watching Netflix because they watch everything on Netflix. They can't find something interesting anymore. I don't know. They don't want it anymore. So yeah, why pay $7.99 if you don't want it?
Totally. And you're so spot on there. Like we're seeing it. 2 years doesn't feel that long when you're an old person, but when you're a youngster, 2 years, 18 to 20 or 16 to 18 is a huge time, isn't it? And so they don't use mainstream stuff. Netflix almost something your parents watch. And if my parents watch it, I don't really want it. And there's stuff like TikTok, which is totally replacing it, or even YouTube and things. There's a very different mechanisms. And this idea of almost must-see TVs change. So demographics are changing. Thing is, all of these things are totally interrelated. And we could, another thing is that Netflix have sort of cracked down on password sharing. So you can't have like one password for multiple households. And that partly is why they think they're going to lose households. So, and the beauty of that is that if we were to do that, could we come up with solutions that perhaps could make sure that they didn't lose 700,000? Absolutely, because we've looked at the problem in so many ways. What could we do? So if we wanted to not lose 700,000, what could we do?
So they've started showing short videos. I'm not sure if everybody saw that. They started like tackling the market of TikTok, and even Facebook realized that they're losing customers, so they did the same with Reel. Even YouTube started doing this as well, short videos. So yeah, they started doing this.
So they're changing their format from like long form videos even into short form. There was an interesting business model. So I don't know how many of you have heard of Quibi that was set up in the US, and they were basically Netflix for TikTok. And the idea was that everything would be up to 6 minutes. They went bankrupt within a quarter because no one watched it. Because their idea was like you make soap operas and dramas that are only 6 minutes long or whatever that you could watch on your phones, and no one wanted it. So it's really interesting. So Netflix, I think we'll look back on Netflix, and this is the moment where it either sold to something else, or in 5 years' time, we won't be talking about it. It'll be sold to something else. And I think everything that you guys have identified there offers opportunities for how we could pivot. So the 5 whys is a really interesting tool, because how often do we actually sit down and think about what is the driver behind things? And we can see that if we nailed it down, if it's not luxurious anymore, if it's not the content's not there, if it's the demographics are totally changing, each of those provides opportunities for development, business ideas, and all of that going forward. So it feels a really interesting approach, but you need to think about why. So why isn't it luxurious? Well, actually, it's probably the content's not there. They don't have the exclusive content. That's because the demographics are changing and people aren't watching it, they're looking at it because they're using short form video. And you can almost see, well, if we can't beat TikTok, we better join them. We'll try that. But it doesn't quite work, because when you copy someone, it tends not to work quite as well. So the first thing that you can do is often, if you're looking for a business idea that you want to come up with, is identify a problem that you have in life. Because if you've got that problem, a lot of other people have that problem. You know, if you are a student and you're dragging yourselves in at 9 o'clock in the morning to study, you're not going to be the only one that's miserable dragging yourself in at 9 o'clock in the morning. So there's a market there that sits within that. And the 5 whys gives you that approach to it. And that's the sort of first element that we think about. So we'll go a bit further then. So we'll apply it here. So this is a big thing in my life at the moment, is university students are recruiting artificial intelligence to write essays for them, okay? So what it means is you get your assignment question, you can go online, you can paste it in, and you will get a unique assignment written for you that will not be plagiarized because it's unique and never come up before. So as a university, this is something that we almost cuts to the core of our business, because how can we assess if everything's marked by AI? But rather than worrying about that, we need to think about why are students using AI? So if we were to apply the 5 whys here, can anyone give me some reasons that students would be using AI to write their essays?
They don't know enough about the subject.
Perfect. So number 1 is they don't feel confident enough to write an assignment. Okay, well, why might that be then, Susan? So if we go to the next why don't they know enough?
It could be a few things. It could be how it's been taught. It could be how much work they're putting in themselves.
Okay, so let's assume it's taught, because that's something we can control. How it's taught doesn't work for them. Why doesn't it work for them then? Has anyone got an answer for that?
Can I answer that one?
Yeah, of course it is.
It could be the type of learner they are. There's different types of learners, and maybe they need to see videos, or they need pictures, or they need, I don't know, they need in front of them, like actually to be able to read it in front of them. Just maybe that. Maybe it's not interesting enough as well.
Right. So let's say it's not interesting enough, because that's another one that we can control. So it's not interesting enough. Why isn't it interesting enough for them?
I'm going to blame the teacher and say maybe the teacher's talking in a monotone accent, and it sounds more like they're reading it from a book rather than it's maybe not interactive as well. So
straight away, we've suddenly gone from blaming the student for making an assignment to going, well, what's the stuff that we can control? Actually, is our course is good enough? You know, and is it things that, you know, I worked in business 25 years ago. So yes, I have some stories, but back then we didn't have Facebook and all of this. So is it that I'm talking about these concepts, which are lovely, but I don't really have any up-to-date information? Am I too out of touch, or I'm not interested enough? So therefore, is that something I can do? So straight away, our instinct with AI assignments is to crack down on the students. Whereas applying the 5 whys, we can almost go, well, actually, perhaps there's something in there that we can control where we make it so that they don't do it. So what might be another reason that they use AI to write assignments? You don't have to put your hand up, honestly. Just
Yeah, probably cultural, because they are from a different cultural background. They don't understand like how to write. Because when, for example, I'm not from the UK, so when I came here to do my PhD, I found out that I have to write like and critique articles and things like this. I'm not used to it, so probably that was my first essay that I've written throughout my whole life. So, and it happens to be a PhD dissertation. So yeah, it might be cultural, so they are afraid, maybe don't know how to tackle it, don't know, like for example, they hear other friends failing and they say, okay, better just get it right from the beginning, and if they got money, why not?
Yeah, absolutely. So it might be a cultural thing, and to be fair, I would probably suggest that's quite a strong thing that we see a lot of international students where actually it's a smart way to work. So why wouldn't you? You know, almost like, why would you sit down and write it if you can get someone else to do it for you? It works back where I'm from, so why wouldn't I do it? And we assume that all students know they shouldn't be doing it, but then why? You know, and I guess that's the question to it. So if it's a cultural issue, why does it matter then?
What do you mean, why does it matter? Why does it matter?
So if we go, why are they using it? It's a cultural issue. So at that point, we can either go, why do we need them not to do that?
Oh, because they need to learn.
Why?
They need to write it themselves. They need to learn from the mistakes, not for an AI to write it for them.
Yeah. Sorry, Craig.
Cheating.
So I
Cheating,
would
yeah.
actually think that basically an AI developed essay compared to a student writing an essay. An AI basically develops an essay based on finite knowledge, and a student would develop an essay based on infinite knowledge. Because at the end of the day, basically AI is searching from a directory. It's basically taking information from a collective of information. But at the same time, an AI cannot develop experience, which a student can. And AI cannot develop personal experience or an encounter that a student can do. And one of the reasons I personally have experienced that students have not been able to write great essays is because most of them have performance anxiety. Like, they are too, as Allah appropriately said, that it's also a culture difference. So there is a performance anxiety that comes in over there. And there is also the factor of being judged, whether we are capable enough or not capable enough in writing a great essay. Because yeah, definitely there's a lot. AI is something upgrade right now, because definitely there are so many services available in the market where people are providing these kind of services and they're calling themselves marketing agencies. So,
and it's really interesting because look, straight away there we've got a range of opinions of why, and when you delve into it, you can either clamp down on it and go, well, actually that's wrong, or you can say, well, actually, how does it fit culturally? If we have international students, how do we do that? Do we need them to write assignments? Can we just get them to speak to us all the time? Are they cheating, or are they not cheating? Or is there even a skill in taking an assignment and actually being able to use AI to write one? Because actually in the workplace, if you can program stuff, in the olden days, we used to tell students to get off their Facebook and all of that. Nowadays, you can get a job basically working on Facebook and doing marketing through that way. So maybe the world is changing and we need to do that. And the 5 whys allows you to go into that. And you can see from that, if we were sitting in a room, we could probably come up with 100 ways to solve this, or either make money out of it or not make money out of it, or whatever it might be. And you can see that something at the beginning might feel like, well, we'll just tell them not to, or we'll crack down on them. Might be, well, actually, if we want a culturally diverse student approach, and there's things like Lionel was saying, well, actually, failure is a big issue for some students. They don't want to fail. So rather than trying and failing, putting something in that's AI is easier to manage with. Is there a conversation around expectations? And the 5 whys allows us to start digging into some of that. And it's a really interesting tool to try and think about, what does it mean, how we can do that. And hopefully when you do it, you get to the end and you'll have more questions than when you started. And the beauty of that is that's where you can start developing business ideas from. So that's where the 5 whys fits as a tool. And I don't know if any of you have got like ideas that you want to turn into businesses, or ideas that you want to look at, but it's a really good way. And the one thing I would suggest with this is always try and do it with someone else, someone that will give you a bit of a robust challenge, because it's very easy in your head to know the solution, and then you make the whys fit your solution, but then you're not really using the tool, you're just using it as a justification for the end. So that's part of it. Does anyone have any questions on the 5 whys at all? No? It's a really straightforward tool. And like I say, it's not rocket science, but actually using it well is quite an interesting one. So that's the sort of first place that you can go, which helps you unlock ideas and starts getting you to think about things in different ways. But an idea is only good enough if we start thinking about it contextually. And what that really means is that an idea is just an idea. What turns it into a good idea or a bad idea is when you compare it to other things, other options, what you can do. So, an answer to the AI thing might be, well, we'll make everyone do exams. Okay, that makes you different, but is it good different? Will all our students dry up overnight? Because if actually the stimulus is performance anxiety, putting them in exam situations is going to just make that so bad for them, so how do we do that? And so you always need to compare yourself to what's going on outside and think about that, and think about what makes you different, what makes you stand out. And one of the things that you can use to understand this is something called reframing. And this is, again, a really, really simple tool. And there's a great book called How Do You Wrestle a Pig? And it's all about how do you, as you say, but it's this metaphor basically about how you reframe the problem. And we've just done this effectively. We looked at the problem where we said AI, we've got students using AI for essays. What's the problem? Well, the problem is almost what Craig's saying. You know, we could go down one route and say, it's a form of cheating, it's not acceptable, we need to fix it. That's one approach. Another approach is what Lionel was saying, which is almost this idea of, you know, perhaps a performance anxiety approach. So depending on how you look at the problem, it can totally suggest a different solution. And you can see for both of those things, you would go for a solution. So for Craig, if we were to assume that using AI is cheating, what would be the solution in your approach? What could we do to avoid this happening?
Some sort of AI Turnitin comparison.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, a monitor inbuilt into the AI system like ChatGPT to maybe a student login. You know, you need to hand in your student ID, and then you know if it's a student, and then you get a fair idea if it's a thesis, essay, document, etc.
So absolutely. So you'd put all your money or your focus on getting something to catch someone from that approach. So how you define the problem almost gives you the solution. So Craig's route, perfectly valid. And I think that's what's going to happen. I think we're going to end up down this route where we may turn it in a bit more sophisticated and things. Okay, that's one. But if it was one of the others, if it was things like performance anxiety, if it was around cultural differences, if we were to reframe students using AI, what would be the solution then? What could we do to solve this issue if we reframed it in a different way?
Is that,
Sorry,
Susan, go ahead.
sorry, could the paper be written in the language from the country that the person was from? Would that even, because sometimes it's understanding the question.
Fantastic. So the first thing might be actually, we're asking them about concepts in a way that perhaps doesn't translate, because we all know if you ever learn another language, words don't mean exactly the same thing. It's not like for like, there's context and even how sentences are structured and all of that. That might be one thing. So it might be even about thinking about the reframing using the language of the questions we do. Okay, that might be one. What else could we do? Go on, Craig, you can talk, you don't have to. It's just...
From what I gather with like the ChatGPT, it's you have to search and ask questions in a certain manner. You could teach students how to look properly, how to ask the proper questions, interrogate it, analyze it, and you know, AI user interface skills or something like that.
Fab. So, and that almost goes back to the earlier point where it's around maybe the value, they don't see the value in it. So maybe part of the problem is it's an easy path, but actually it's an empty path because they don't change at the end. Whereas if we can almost show the value and show how we do research, and actually, if you can use Google Scholar and things, it isn't that hard. You know, it's not that, it's a little bit more difficult, but actually the benefits are you get to come and do a PhD, you get to, you know, do all of the wonderful stuff. What else could we do?
Well, probably looking at this, I can remember the pain and gain. I don't know if it's a model or something, but the pain, we need to identify the pains for the students, and then what are the gains from. So by identifying the pains, we can flip it and find the gains for the students. And when they understand that these are the gains that I will have from writing the essay myself, then we kind of tackle the problem. In addition to, what you have said about making measures in place or putting measures in place just to catch plagiarism.
And that's fantastic, because what you've done there is you've reframed it. Those titles look at it from an organizational point of view. They look at it from the university. How do we stop students doing this? What you're saying is, actually, what's the problem for students? So if we reframe it in a student's point of view, how do we remove their pain? How do we turn it into something positive? And actually, if we do that, the initial problem goes away. So just reframing it from viewpoint makes a difference, whether it's a user, a purchaser, all of that. So again, a really simple tool, but suddenly, you know, in a space of 5 minutes, we've answered it like loads of different ways, and some of them are more expensive than others. And will they all work? Probably to different degrees. But it shows you that if you just sit down and have a conversation with some really intelligent people, you can sort of come up with a way that you come up with different approaches. And none of this is rocket science. You know, this is not a really massively complicated model or anything like that. It's just about thinking about things in different ways. And the reality is that we all look at the world through our own biases and our own viewpoint, our own experiences, our own language. You know, I'm a white middle class English male, so I have a huge amount of privilege in life. And I've never been wolf whistled by a builder in my life, you know, and I doubt I've been sexually harassed. I hadn't noticed anyway, but and that experience is not universal, you know. And actually, I can sit here and go, well, that doesn't happen. What I mean is, it doesn't happen to me. But could I reframe it and think about it in different ways? And that's where it's really clever, that idea of taking it away from the organization and looking at it from the student's point of view. We're blaming them rather than asking them why they do that. You know, it's a really interesting thing. So really sort of aside, do any of you know what a desire path is? Have you ever heard of this? I'll tell you this now, and then once you know, you'll always see them. Okay, so there's something called a desire path. And if you ever get to like, you'll see it, especially in Scotland and England, is there'll be like a walkway, so the pavement that goes around next to a road, and there'll be like a little patch of grass, and people have walked across it, and there'll just be like this rut where people walk across it. And what that's known as a desire path, because people take the shortest route, but the planners have made it go up and around the corner, but the population go, no, and walk across the desire path, because that's the shortest cut for them. So what happens is people get cross about it. But why? Why don't you just make the pavement go that way? That would be the answer. Like, if they're going to go that way, why don't we make it go that way? So why don't we make the path, the desire path, because that's what people are going to do. And so you'll start to see them around town. You look and there'll be, anywhere you see like little shortcuts, that's what's known as the desire path. And you can point that out and look very clever. And if you're a planner, or if you're designing a building and you looked at desire paths, that tells you where people are going to walk. So you can either try and change their behavior by putting up fences and stuff like that. And people are idiots. They'll climb over fences because they still want to, they'll get annoyed because someone's put a fence in their way. Or you can go, why don't I help the desire path and make it not wet? You know, so it's a really interesting thing. And that's where this reframing comes from. And it also has to come from a place where we have to acknowledge that our experience is not everyone's experience. So as soon as we get to that point, that's a really powerful thing, because unless we're selling to ourselves, that's no good. So reframing is a really, really interesting approach to do. So I'm going to test you now. And some of you might know this. I don't know whether you know this or not. So you're going to work for a company called Otis Lifts. So Otis Lifts. If you grew up in the UK and you used to see the broom cupboard on BBC and they had Otis the Aardvark, Otis the Aardvark is named after Otis the Lifts. That's where the name comes from, if you're as old and grey as me. So Otis Lifts, you've had a complaint from one of your biggest customers that your lifts are too slow. It feels like it takes a long time to get from the ground floor to their offices on floor 11. They want to know what the answer is. So how can you as a lift company answer this complaint that the lifts are too slow? What could you do?
Express lifts.
Express lifts. So you can make them faster. You could turn them up to 10, so they're like, phew, like rocket ship straight up there. What would be the downside to that though?
You'd miss a lot of the floors.
yeah. Anyone that wants to stop at 1 to 10 wouldn't do that. You might get people. Yeah.
Sorry.
Go on, sorry, Craig.
I was going to say staggered, you know, odd lift.
Yeah.
Odd.
So okay, so we'll start with first. First one's make them faster. Right, that seems the obvious one. You'll get people being sick though, and you know, all of that. Okay, next.
Yeah, have more lifts.
More lifts.
So-
Yeah, totally. So put more lifts in, so then you don't. Maybe perhaps part of that's waiting time, as you say, for like lifts and things like that. Small lifts. What's the downside to putting more lifts in?
Expensive.
Yeah, and it takes up space, and that's a real challenge with everything that sits in it. So that's a difficult one. What else could we do?
Take the stairs.
Maybe we can inform the customers about why the lifts are slow. Like, you know, I think so they look at it as a problem because they lack information about why the lifts are slow.
Right.
You know,
So it might be wide. You might have like, yeah, they might explain that the lift is, I don't know. I don't know how you would do that, Lionel. I'm not sure, like, this lift is feeling a bit slow today, or
no, might be because see, there are, if basically in a building now, there are old people, there are pregnant ladies, there are kids, you know, and so a lift company basically, there are a lot of accidents that takes place in a lift, you know, and going up is also a problem, coming down is also a problem. People don't worry a lot when the lift goes up, but when it comes down is the most fear that people have actually recorded. So
Okay.
if we are able to inform the customers that, or inform the client that there is a purpose why basically lifts are slow. And if it's a society, for example, if it's a society that is basically risen this complaint, and if the society leaders are able to basically compile a unified decision that they need the lifts to go faster, then we can make the change, because
Wow.
we cannot listen to one particular complaint, because we also need to categorize the customer complaints and what categories would they fit. Accordingly, we would be able to handle them.
So no, before you go down that route, that's definitely a 5 whys thing. Looking at that, but we just got to solve this. We're assuming this, but that's good. So we can, and that's why like bus timetables might say next bus is 5 minutes. So you have a concept of how long that might take. Okay, what else could we do?
Yeah, I think some of what I was thinking there is probably what's just been said there, and it was basically finding out exactly what's delaying the lift. Is there cleaners holding the lifts on a floor?
Yeah.
Could be something like that that might actually be the reason, and maybe making the customer aware that the lifts will be slower at busier times, it starts and finishing times and lunch times.
Right. So you could have like almost peak times flagged up, so where it might stop at every floor, but then there might be outside times where they have express lifts or something like that. That might be interesting. Okay, what else? Did you have one, Emma?
No, I said take the stairs, but obviously not.
Take the stairs,
everybody could take the stairs. So
I have to say, I think a lift company telling them to take the stairs might be the end of the lift contract, though.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
Schedule
Anyone
people different
else?
floors.
Sorry, go on.
I was saying schedule different people's timing,
Yeah.
leaving, entering, breaks. and stuff.
Fabulous. So that's a great one. So is the lift slow because everyone finishes at 5? So could you stagger the people leaving here? That's a really, God, that's such a, you're starting to think bigger than the lift now, aren't you, to do that? Could we get people to do that? Could we do in different demand times? Could we have a speed setting on the lift that when you get in, you push floor 11 and you have choice between 1 and 5 on your speed? So if you're a bit of a daredevil, you might pick a 5, and if you're sensitive, you might pick a 1. So you might have that.
Speak
Does anyone?
to the
Go on.
Sorry, I was going to say actually speak to the company, and going back to what Emma says, and just seeing if they can encourage healthy, like taking care of the health and exercise, and actually encouraging them maybe to go to the 11th floor and walk to the 12th or something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Offer them money, like if you take the stairs, then we'll give you some money. That might be it. Again, all brilliant solutions, and all would probably fix us the answer. And there's even things like, put music in the lifts, because when people are having a little boogie, when the really bad lift music, you sort of do that. Well, the actual answer, and this is a real problem that happened, and the actual answer is they put mirrors in the lift. Why did that change anything?
This is Edward de Bono. People never get tired of looking at themselves.
Totally. So what you do, you get in the lift and you go, I'm not looking rough, good, bad, whatever. Oh, I'm at 11th floor. So what they did was that, and this is why all lifts have mirrors in them. This is why when you often, where you push the button for the lift, it's often reflective as well. And what they said is, we don't change the time of the lift. We just change your perception of the time of the lift. So the problem isn't the lift. The problem is you. So that's why lifts have mirrors. And it's crazy. And there's other reasons. There's things like if wheelchair users get in, they can see if there's anyone behind them if they want to get out and stuff like that. But that's why lifts have mirrors. But without reframing the problem, because what we've done is we've looked at the problem and said, the lift is the issue. What they've said is the people are the issue. And you started down that pathway, didn't you, with the getting the stairs and thinking about different times. But let's think about the cost implications of putting loads more lift shafts in and new lifts, or putting a mirror in. So no matter what you think, you'll go away today and you'll notice desire paths, and then you'll start telling people why lifts have mirrors, and then people get really bored of you. And that's literally why they have mirrors in them. It's really, really interesting, and it's about mechanisms of control.
It can also make a small space seem larger.
Totally. And why would that matter in a lift?
Claustrophobic.
Totally.
Tight spaces, yeah.
Yeah. And there is just this intrinsic fear that you're out of control in a lift, that, as you say, you can make it feel bigger and all of those sorts of things. So you're not just in a metal box held with some wire going up a very steep building sort of thing. So it's got lots of things, but unless you reframe the problem and understand what the problem is, we would never have got to that solution. We would have been busy building extra lift shafts or speeding them up and down or chucking money at people to use the stairs sort of thing. Now, again, it's not like an idea is, there's no one in there. It's not like there's a light bulb goes on normally. It's a case of like sitting around and talking and discussing all of these sorts of things that comes together. So it's really important that when you start looking at thinking, start going, well, often we can make things very complicated trying to answer it, but is there an easy solution? What are we trying to do? And are we addressing the right solution? You know, is the solution to make the lift faster, or is it to play with people's perception of time? And when you get stuff like this, you go, aha, that's really clever. So that's like a really important thing to do. So we've got this idea of the 5 whys, and then we've got this idea of reframing a problem. So how could we reframe this problem? So let's think about this. This is from Mintel, and what they say is a recession and a cost of living crisis. The latest GDP figures show that the UK economy grew by 0.1% in November, boosted by the World Cup and spending on food and drinks. But bad economic news continues to stack up. The Bank of England is predicting a very challenging 2-year recession. Okay, so that doesn't sound like great news. So our initial thoughts are what? What's the problem in that? The Bank of England is predicting a very challenging 2-year recession. What would we initially say the problem is there?
So the nominal wage won't get you as much good as it used to.
Fab. So the wages might not go up. Does everyone know what a recession is? Yeah. So a recession is defined as 2 consecutive periods of negative growth where the country isn't growing. So we're saying for 2 years, the output of what we produce is going to go down. Number one, wages are going to be impacted probably by that. What else is likely to happen if organizations aren't growing? What are they likely to do?
Unemployment.
Yeah, they're going to
Lay
cut
people off.
costs. Fantastic. And we're seeing that now, aren't we? Amazon laying people off, Microsoft, Google, we're seeing that. What else?
Cut on quality or the size.
So that's going to have a total knock on. So we might say we're not going to grow. Wages aren't going to go up. There's going to be less people employed. So they're not going to spend the money on Netflix and all of these sorts of things. So the problem there feels like really negative. And it's like, so if we were looking at that, what sort of business could we set up that would take advantage of that?
No frills. Nothing.
No frills? Why would no frills matter?
Because you only spend on the service itself, nothing extra. For example, flat companies, they do this. The no frills is economy. Yeah.
Brilliant. So what you find in recession is people go to 2 ends of the spectrum. They basically, normally you buy like middle stuff, so Heinz beans or whatever. What happens in recession is people go for basic stuff for a lot of their things, but they also do go for luxury because it's their little treat. But they'll do a lot less luxury and a lot more things. So companies have to decide whether they're going to go, you know, lovely, lovely, expensive stuff or very no frills. And I think you're right. I think no frills. Sorry, Susan, what else?
Sorry, I was going off on something else. I was thinking of like
No.
creating a business focused on like bike hire, where it was
Fantastic.
cycling and stuff.
Why would that be a good thing?
It's well, it's encouraging exercise, and it'll help to reduce money in terms of maybe spending on people need to go to hospitals, doctor's appointments, things like that. It's helping mental health, all that kind of thing. But at the same time, people enjoy getting outside. I don't know. Sorry.
No, do you know what? You've just answered the part 2. So this is really, you know, from an external point of view, we could sit here and go, oh, they're not going to spend money, they're not going to do that. But what Susan's automatically gone and done, she's done the 5 whys in her head, she's reframed the problem and gone, well, actually, we've got an opportunity for sort of behavior change. If we were to offer rental is number one. So the first thing is we change our sales models. So rather than selling something, we rent something, because actually what people talk about is it's not about money, it's about affordability. So you might be able to afford a £5 a month, but you might not be able to afford £5 a week, but you might not be able to afford £20 a month because you might not be able to save up £20. But if you get paid weekly, you might be able to spend £5. Even though the totals are the same, affordability is different. So Susan's gone straight there. But also taking something that could be seen as negative and turning it into, well, actually, we can position this as a positive thing. It's saving money, it's giving people transportation approaches, it's engaging in a marketplace where health and concerns might be part of it and all of that. So we're reframing the problem from recession probably means people aren't buying things as much. So what can we do? Can we rent stuff? Can we do a freemium model? So one of the big things you'll often find with apps or anything on your phone is it's free to use to start with, and then they charge you for extra features. And the reason they do that is because the more people you have using the app, the better it is. And if it's worth that money, people will top it up. If you charged someone 50 quid straight away, they wouldn't download it. So you might then say, well, actually, again, taking Susan's idea, is this a point where we change our business model? Do we reframe it and actually say, you know, Netflix is 20 quid a month, but do we just charge you £1 a day and we'll just bill you daily? Or do we, whatever it might be, or do we go to a free model where we just put adverts on, effectively become a TV channel, whatever it might be? And so straight away, we've gone from, oh, that's really bad news and people might be unemployed, to there's always opportunities to do something. So that might be one. What might be another business opportunity if we're going to enter recession? So if we're looking at perhaps more increased unemployment, perhaps a drop in wages, perhaps either no frills products or, you know, luxurious products becoming very niche, what could we do to come up with a business that might make us some money?
Is it the gig economy? Because the gig economy is based on just recession, because you just make money regardless. I mean,
so explain what's the gig economy for people that don't know.
it's jobs like Deliveroo and Uber drivers. It's not a career. It's something that you do just to put food on the table and to get money to get by. So student jobs and things like this. But some people, even with graduate degrees, they do it just to have more money, maybe on the side of another full-time job or part-time job. They do it.
Yeah, fabulous. And that's a great thing. And it's, again, another opportunity, because you're like, well, actually, when we talk about jobs, people tend to think of careers. But what we're seeing is people don't have careers anymore. They have lots of jobs and they might earn a little bit of money from lots of places. And because what it means is if one of the jobs goes, they've still got income elsewhere. Or it's in the US, they talk about the idea of a side hustle. And there's like a website called Fiverr, where if you can speak a different language or you can play an instrument, you can put your services up and you might say, I'll do 500 word translation and it will cost you £5. And you can trade your skills in different areas. And one of the big things that's changed is working for a company for life has sort of disappeared, really. That's really doesn't happen anymore. And we're moving towards a concept where people work in movie style. So they almost come together to work on a project. And when the project's finished, they go off and do other stuff. So you're almost becoming a company in yourself. And you're absolutely spot on there. We could see this as a really bad thing. But again, so if I was thinking from the university point of view, so we've got people that want to study. We know these students are probably going to have more financial pressures than ever. But we've also got this wealth of talent. Why haven't we got a student gig employment agency, whatever it might be? Why aren't we marrying up some of the skills that we have internally, externally? Don't know, you know, there's probably lots of reasons for it, but that might be an opportunity. So I think one of the things there is like looking around to find the gaps. Research shows that when you set up a business in recession, you are more likely to be successful because you're setting it up at the worst time. And a lot of the companies that go bust are the ones that set up when it's all going lovely. And then suddenly when it comes to the crunch, they can't do that. So if you can find a business that can make money in a recession, you are likely to make money all the time because that need doesn't change. And it's a really interesting thing. And that's where stuff like Kickstart that we're looking at now, as much as we're going into this recession period, it's a really good idea to start looking around and thinking about what you can do as a concept. And there's loads of different bits and pieces. And one of the things I would say is if you're ever looking for an idea and you want to do research, UWS has brilliant access to Mintel research articles through the library. Honestly, it's got all the latest stuff on it about consumer trends. And so what we're seeing is that we're saying, like, the first thing is there's a big thing around package holidays. So what they're doing is we need to sell holidays to people because even in recession, people want to go on holidays, but we make the payments flexible. So that's one. Next thing is actually, communication and innovation for brands. The better we're at that, the more successful we'll be. So let's take the time to do that. Interest rates might goose savings. So that might come back to this idea of doing like bikes for free or whatever it might be. How can we encourage people into positive approaches to save? Online shopping. We're going to find that this recession will start to drive people online again, looking for better prices. So maybe there's a thing in there with price comparison websites or screen scrapers or something like that. I don't know, or could we get links to businesses where, a certain demographic gets a discount because they bulk buy or whatever it might be. Interestingly, extra factors are coming in. Sustainability is now becoming, if we're going to go for luxurious stuff, we want it to be greener. We want to think about things like electric cars and all of that. So there's another gap opening there. And also health foods are another one. Weirdly, you wouldn't think that health benefits in groceries would be the time to launch it. But Mintel are telling us that in this recession that's coming up, if we can get healthy food launched now, it's more likely to be successful ongoing. So it's a really important thing. And this is what experts are telling us. So do you want a break or do you want me to keep going? You want a break? 10-minute break? So should we just say come back at 10 past? Is that all right for everyone? If you've got any thoughts, think about them and come back. Cool.
Can I come in for a second?
Okay.
Sorry, go on, Craig. What?
Hi, my name's Craig. I just wanted to speak. I'm guessing the rest of you are all our students. I'm just wondering what it is you study, because I'm one of these guys where ideas just come to me kind of rapid. So I've got ideas that I'm interested in developing. I'm looking for people to work with. So I'm curious if any of you would be interested in talking about it. So you can think about that through the rest of the workshop and let me know if you're okay with that. Thank you.
Craig's looking at his fellow millionaires now, isn't he? He's looking for your future millionaires. So when you all make money, you can
well, yeah,
business partners.
yeah, it's that simple. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Cool. All right, so see you back about 10 past 2. That's all right. One of the key things, and again, I'm probably the one thing I'd say about like all of this stuff is none of it is rocket science. None of it is like amazingly hard things to do. And again, this sort of next step. So we've got two ways. We've got this idea of the first thing is we look at root cause analysis. We understand the 5 whys and what sits behind the issue. The next thing is, can we reframe the problem to understand if there's a different way of looking at it? Does that open up opportunities? And then sort of the next thing we think, well, okay, that's lovely. And we've got loads of lovely ideas and bits and pieces, but how do we turn those ideas into reality? The first thing I would say is research. And this is something that's really important. And I think refers back to the point I made earlier, where I was saying around, we look at the world through our viewpoint, through our eyes, and we believe that everyone feels the same. And the reality is they don't. We're unique. That's what makes us wonderful as well. But also we need to make sure that when we talk about someone having a problem or we look at something in a certain way, is this supported with information? And one of the things I'd love to highlight, and I think this is something that as a university is totally underrated, is the library has a business insight tools. It has a one-file news thing. It has Statista. It has Mintel. It has the UK Data Service. And all of this has externally validated research done for you, probably about your idea that you want. So if you're thinking about something into fast foods, there's Mintel reports on it, there's Statista reports. And again, one of the keys to being a good entrepreneur or adopting an entrepreneurial mindset is knowing what you don't know. And research is really at the heart of it. And the amount of times that people come up with a great idea and then it takes about 2 seconds to poke a hole in it because they've not gone away and thought about it. And the reality is we've got this stuff for free as alumni, as staff, as students and things like this. We should absolutely be using this as a tool to drive our ideas. And the best thing is when you start looking through this, you go, oh yeah, I could do this and this. Often it creates yes ands to what you need to do for your idea. So you come up with this idea, you've done your reframing, do some research. Honestly, go and spend like half an hour with all of this. And even things like the business insights, you can actually look at companies and SWOTs and case studies and market research for free, which is just insane. I think it's a brilliant tool. We just don't use it enough as something that happens. And the sort of age-old thing that we get to, and something that sort of stands the test of time is this concept of the elevator pitch. And of course, I had to put it in because we talked about lifts earlier. So whilst you're staring into the mirror, waiting to get to the 11th floor penthouse because you're now CEO or whatever it is, there's this concept of an elevator pitch, and there's loads of different ways that you can talk about it. I quite like this, and I think one of the challenges for a lot of people that come up with an idea is they can't distill it. And part of the reason they can't distill it is because they don't know what the problem is. And it's amazing how many times that people say, I've invented X, or I want to do it this way. And you go, yeah, but why? And you ask about 3 whys and they sort of crumble, and they sort of just almost resort to, well, you know. So the elevator pitch almost, again, puts that tension or that problem at the heart of something and then answers it. And that's the reality. And if you can do that, so when I used to work in innovation, we always said that a good product comes out of a customer tension or a problem. It's very rare that a product is launched that doesn't answer an issue. It only tends to be very, very high-end luxury stuff that isn't answering a problem. And the reason is that if you can answer someone's problem, or you can reduce attention for them, or something that, you know, we talk about piss-off factors and stuff like that. And if you've ever seen me speak before, talked about things like, so if you go to supermarkets, in 20 years ago, they used to have like doors that revolved, and they were great for keeping heat in and stuff, but they got rid of them because when you walk, you sort of take 2 steps and bang into it and things like this. And what would happen is it's a piss-off factor. People don't want to go somewhere they can't get in easily. So now they have heat curtains and doors that open very quickly and all of these sorts of things. It's like parking around a supermarket. Supermarkets tend to be based with car parks wrapped around them, so you don't have to walk in mentally that far. Whereas if you had the same space in one long rectangular block, people would feel at the end they're too far away. And you're answering problems, whether it's perceived problems or real problems, and that does it. And so once you've unpicked your idea, and we do this, we then can put it into sort of the form of an elevator pitch. And because we're starting with the question, it automatically tells you the issue. And if we go back to the concept of let's go back to the concept of lifts in this one. So the question might be, do you ever feel that the lift takes too long to get to floor 11? And if I ask that question and they're going to say yes in their head, it's a bit of a sales technique. Once someone says yes in their head, they start listening to you. So you go, oh God, yeah, someone understands me. It's a comedy trick as well. If you ever see some of the comedians that talk about the past, they go, oh, do you remember when? Da, 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 da. You go, yeah, I remember that. Everyone remembers it, but I remember it as well. And it's about creating that connection with someone. You're creating a positive connection. Do you remember the last time you tried to park your car and you, oh yeah, no, absolutely. Oh, isn't that a real load of hassle, you know? But we've dealt with it and we can solve it in this way or whatever it is. So this form of elevator pitch for me is a really powerful one because you're putting the question at the heart of it and you're creating that connection straight away. So when you pitch, so if you said to students, you know, what if you didn't come to class, you know, you didn't come to class every morning feeling angry? Oh, wouldn't that be a good thing or whatever? And you go, or wouldn't you like to do less homework? You know, that would be, oh yes, I'd love to do less homework. Right, well, if we do a bit of research and we could do this, you could use this, or we could do group work online or whatever. By using the question up front, you're contextualizing what you're looking at, you're identifying what you're addressing, and you're creating a connection to the person that you're pitching to. And if you can do that well, that is half the battle because you know what you're doing. The amount of times that people go, I've got an app that does this, and people are like, well, so what? Why does that matter? Yes, it might annoy you, but does it annoy anyone? So do any of you have like Amazon Alexas or Google Home or anything like that at home? Yeah? No? Yes? Oh, it's mixed. So interestingly, Amazon are having a real issue. So they thought that Amazon Alexa would make them a fortune. Okay, they thought they would make a load of money. How did they think that they were going to make money? Can anyone guess? They're having a voice assistant in the house. What do they think you were going to do?
Use it.
But what do you mean by use it though?
All the things.
Well, I've got all of these gadgets, but I don't use none of them. I've not even opened them out of the box. I bought them because, honestly, I bought them in Black Fridays years ago, and they're still, I've got the Google one, they're not even in use.
Yeah. So
So they sold the idea to me, but I didn't. My phone does a lot of stuff.
right. So it's really interesting you say that. So it's this the is it Ella? Is that how you
Yeah.
pronounce your name? Sorry, yeah.
Yeah,
So Ella was saying that it's
all
you
the
know it's
things.
this order things. Amazon were like, do you know what? You will put these things in your home and you'll order stuff. And the reality is no one orders anything. Why? Because it's horrible. So I've got one and I use it to play music. It's a good timer for stuff. I might set the
Yeah.
reminder to put the bins out. You know, everything that doesn't do anything for Amazon, I don't ever order anything off it. Even when they try to tell me stuff, it's like, oh, I might get it to tell me a joke or do the weather forecast or, you know, all the stuff that doesn't add any value. So Amazon had this new frontier of making money and it's losing money hand over fist because they sold them at cost price, with what Susan's saying. I bought them all because they were cheap, but I don't use them. So they thought they'd get them in the homes and they would dominate. And it's amazing. So if you were doing the pitch for that, it's like, well, what's the solution? Well, Amazon Alexa, but what's the question? What's the thing that people are missing in their life? And that's partly why it hasn't worked, because Susan's not sitting there going, oh, my life's not complete. They're still in the box, but my life's not complete. You're like, I can absolutely manage without them, you know? So therefore, they're not addressing a question. And it's interesting, it's stuff like iPads. When iPads were first launched, it's like, what was the question that they were answering? Well, it's a bit bigger than a mobile, but it's a bit smaller than a laptop, right? But what's the problem? And that's why they haven't necessarily. They've now found a niche where they're basically small TVs. And that's what's happened is TVs have now become tablets effectively. So if you can get to the point where you put your question and your challenge and your attention up front, you create that connection with the people, and then you go from there. It shows you what you do. And if we go back to that idea of how do you add value, you go back and think about it. And you might say, well, have you ever spent ages waiting for a lift? Oh yeah, that's wasted productivity time. So we've invented this new reflective coating that you can fit to your fridge, to your lift, and it costs, I don't know, $100, and people will forget how long it takes. So suddenly you buy into all the stuff that you do. So again, this is not meant to be teaching you to suck eggs or things that you don't know, but sometimes we overcomplicate ideas into reality. And one of the things we'll do one day is I do a session where I can get 150 ideas in about 3.5 minutes. So we can do like all of these things, and we might just put on a day where we do it and invite people along to come and have a go. And again, it's literally nothing difficult. I just get to play games and stuff, and we come up with ideas. And it's unlocking this way. And people like to make business and all of this very complicated, mainly because they want to charge money for it and write books about it. But really, if you're answering a problem, if you understand what you're doing, if you've got a good idea that is feasible and probably not illegal, you know, if you can articulate it really well, you'll stand a good chance of like it being successful. And especially when we get onto things like Kickstart, which I hope you're all going to apply for and all take part in, and obviously commission my way when you do win, you know, so that's all part of it. But if you can do this and you can really distill your ideas, if you can reframe a problem, if you can think about things with the 5 whys, suddenly you've got a really strong idea before you've even written the pitch. And that's the difference. You start from a point of strength.